Samuel had lived alone on his ranch for almost 7 years, ever since his parents passed away. His land stretched far across the dry grassland, with only a few cottonwood trees near the creek and a small wooden cabin he built with his own hands. Life was simple, quiet, and predictable. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, fed the horses, checked the cattle, cleaned the stables, repaired fences, and worked until the sun went down. He didn't complain. Hard work kept his mind steady and his heart calm. People in town respected him because he never caused trouble, never raised his voice, and always treated others fairly. But even with all that respect, Samuel lived a very lonely life. Days passed without conversation, and nights fell in complete silence. On one cold evening in late winter, Samuel returned home after spending hours fixing a broken section of fencing near the north pasture. The air was sharp, turning every breath into a small cloud of white. His gloves were stiff with frost, and his shoulders ached from lifting heavy lumber. All he wanted was warmth, his fireplace, his dinner, and a quiet night of rest. But as he approached his barn, something made him slow down. A thin figure stood near the large wooden doors. It was too still to be an animal, too small to be a threat. When Samuel got closer, he realized it was a woman, wrapped in worn-out blankets, trembling slightly from the cold. She was not alone. A small girl, no more than 6 years old, hid behind her legs, gripping the edges of her blanket with tiny fingers. The child's face was pale, her lips cracked from the winter wind. Samuel felt a strange jolt of concern deep in his chest. He had never seen them before. The woman lifted her head slowly when she heard his footsteps crunching on the frozen ground. Her eyes were dark, tired, and full of fear. Fear of being turned away. Fear of danger. Fear of asking for help from a stranger. She stood straight, even though she was shaking. Her dignity was the first thing Samuel noticed. She looked like someone who had suffered much, but refused to bow to it. "Sir," she said softly, her voice uneven from exhaustion. "Please, I need help." Samuel took a step closer, keeping his hands visible and calm so she wouldn't feel threatened. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No, my daughter. She hasn't eaten since yesterday morning. We have nowhere to go. Hire me for one night, please. I can work. I can clean, wash clothes, anything. I only need a little food for my daughter." The words struck him unexpectedly hard. He had seen hardship before, but never a mother begging to work just for a child's meal. Her clothes were traditional Apache garments, torn in places from long travel. Her braids were undone from the wind. The child beside her pressed her face deeper into the woman's blanket, too tired even to stand straight. "What's your name?" Samuel asked quietly. "Naira," she whispered. "And this is my daughter, Aaliyah." Samuel looked at the little girl again. Her eyes were half open, heavy with exhaustion. Her tiny feet were bare inside worn moccasins. Something inside, Samuel tightened, painfully. Winter nights could kill even strong men. What chance did these two have out here alone? He didn't say anything at first. He simply opened his barn door wider and motioned for them to follow him toward the house. Naira hesitated, unsure if she should trust him. But Aaliyah stumbled slightly, and that was enough. Naira carried the child into the warmth of Samuel's cabin. Inside, the fire was still burning from the morning. Samuel immediately added more wood, making the flames rise and cast a gentle glow around the room. He placed a blanket over Aaliyah's shoulders and handed her a small piece of warm bread. The child ate slowly at first, unsure if she was allowed to. But when Samuel nodded gently, she ate faster, with small, desperate bites. Naira watched her daughter with relief but also shame. She didn't want to look like she was taking advantage. She didn't want to appear weak. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to stand tall. "Sir, I must work," she said. "I don't accept charity." Samuel admired her spirit. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. "But if it makes you feel better, there are things you can help with." Naira nodded gratefully. She placed her daughter near the fire, where she quickly fell asleep on a curled blanket. Then Naira began searching for tasks, without waiting to be told. She folded Samuel's laundry neatly. She swept the floor with quiet efficiency. She fetched water from the barrel outside, even though the wind was freezing. She cared for the responsibility as if it were her home, even though she had just arrived. As Samuel watched her work, he realized she wasn't doing this because she wanted payment. She was doing it because she wanted to keep her dignity, to show her daughter that working for their survival was honorable. The simple strength in her movements impressed him more than he expected. Hours passed. Naira finished every chore she could find. She even stepped outside again to check the horses, soothing one that was restless. Samuel followed her quietly and saw the way she moved with calm respect around the animals. She was not weak. She was simply exhausted, pushed into desperation by life's harshness. When she returned inside, Aaliyah was still sleeping peacefully. Naira brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead and let out a small breath of relief. Then, she turned to Samuel. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I earned this food tonight. Now, we should go, before we cause you trouble." Samuel stared at her in disbelief. "Anywhere," she answered in a steady voice. "We cannot stay. People do not like when my people come close to their land. If they find us here, they will trouble you. I don't want that. I don't want that." Samuel stepped forward, shaking his head. "You're not taking a child out in this cold. Not tonight." Naira tried to argue. "It is only one night. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Samuel said firmly but still kindly. "You two stay here tonight. There is space, and it's warm. No one will bother you." She hesitated for a long moment, torn between pride and fear. Finally, she looked at Aaliyah, breathing softly in her sleep. A mother's heart made the decision. She nodded slowly. Samuel prepared a small bed for them near the fire. It was simple, but warm. Naira tucked her daughter in first, then sat beside her, watching the flames dance. Samuel returned to his rocking chair, pretending to read a book so she wouldn't feel watched. But he stole occasional glances at her. In the soft firelight, he saw the exhaustion deepen, but also a strange strength that made her sit upright even when she could barely keep her eyes open. When she finally drifted into sleep, Samuel gently placed another log on the fire and watched the room fill with warm light. He had helped people before, neighbors, travelers, strangers passing through, but tonight felt different. This wasn't just kindness. It felt like something he was meant to do, something he couldn't ignore. As he sat in silence, the weight of the moment settled in his heart. He had lived alone for so long that he forgot what it felt like to protect someone, to care for someone, even in such a simple way. Seeing Naira and her child asleep in his home stirred emotions he hadn't felt in years. He looked at them one last time before lying down. A quiet promise formed in his mind. He wouldn't let anything happen to them. Not while they were under his roof. Not while he could help. And in that quiet, cold night, something changed in Samuel's life without him fully realizing it. A door that had been closed for years opened just a little, warmed by the presence of a mother and child who had asked only for a chance to survive one more night. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting soft golden light across the frosted grass. Samuel woke earlier than usual. He wasn't sure if it was because of habit or because he remembered he had two unexpected guests sleeping near his fireplace. He moved quietly, not wanting to wake them. When he glanced toward the corner of the room, he saw Naira sitting upright, already awake, her daughter still curled up under the blanket beside her. Naira's eyes opened fully when she heard him approach. She looked alert, as if expecting trouble even in a warm home. Her survival instincts were strong, shaped by harsh experiences. Samuel nodded politely, giving her a gentle smile to show she was safe. She returned a small nod. See, see, but her expression was still tense. You didn't sleep? He asked softly. I slept enough, she replied. I am grateful for the night. Her eyes moved toward the door. We will leave soon. Samuel shook his head. No hurry. At least have breakfast. She hesitated. But he didn't wait for her answer. He began preparing a simple meal. Scrambled eggs, bread warmed on the pan, and a pot of morning tea. As the smell spread through the cabin, Aaliyah woke up, rubbing her eyes sleepily. The little girl smiled when she saw the warm bread, and Samuel felt his heart soften again. He placed 2 plates on the table and 1 smaller plate for Aaliyah. Naira tried to refuse at first, saying she didn't want to take too much. But Samuel insisted in his calm, steady voice. You both need the strength. You walked far. She finally agreed and sat with her daughter, watching her eat eagerly. When Samuel joined them at the table, the air felt different, like a strange new beginning that none of them had planned. After breakfast, Naira stood up immediately. Please, tell me what work I can do today. Samuel lifted an eyebrow. You plan to work again? Yes, she said firmly. You helped us. I will work to repay it. Samuel respected her determination. All right, he said. There are things to be done. He gave her small tasks, nothing too hard. She swept the porch, folded blankets, and carried water from the well. Her movements were graceful but full of purpose. She didn't rush, yet she didn't waste time. The more Samuel watched her, the more he realized she had lived through difficult times. She knew how to survive, how to keep going, even when the path was heavy. While Naira worked outside, Samuel prepared feed for the horses. Aaliyah followed him closely, her tiny footsteps matching his. She was shy but curious. And Samuel found himself talking to her gently, explaining how the horses liked their food and which ones were his favorites. She listened quietly, her eyes wide. When her mother finished her chores, she called out gently to be sure she could see her daughter. Samuel nodded, showing she was safe. Naira's shoulders relaxed for a moment. Trust was forming, slowly but clearly. As the day went on, the sun climbed higher and brought a bit of warmth. Samuel and Naira worked side by side, not speaking much, but the silence felt peaceful. They shared small glances, small smiles, without forcing conversations. It was strange for Samuel. For years, he had worked alone, spoken to no one, and heard only the wind and the animals. Now, simply having someone nearby made the ranch feel different. Around midday, Samuel took a break and handed Naira a cup of water. She sat down on the wooden steps, her daughter curled beside her. For the first time, Samuel sat with them. He asked about her village, but carefully, not wanting to pry. Our people struggled, she said quietly. Winter came early. Food grew less. My husband, he fell sick. I tried to care for him, but he didn't survive. She paused, her voice steady but heavy. After that, everything became harder. Samuel nodded. He didn't interrupt. He knew that when someone spoke of pain, it wasn't his job to ask more. It was his job to listen. Naira looked at the land stretching before them. I came here because I had no choice. I tried to find work in town, but most doors were closed to us. Samuel felt anger stir inside him. He knew people weren't always fair, but imagining a widow and her child turned away made him feel something deeper, something protective. You're safe here, he said softly. Naira looked at him with quiet surprise. She didn't expect kindness to come without conditions. She nodded once, grateful but unsure of the future. In the afternoon, Samuel saddled one horse and checked the other's hooves. As he worked, 3 of his neighbors slowly rode onto his land. Naira saw them from a distance and immediately stiffened. She moved closer to her daughter, her eyes full of fear. Samuel noticed and stepped forward quickly. The men greeted him, but their eyes kept drifting toward Naira. Their expressions weren't friendly. Samuel approached them calmly, standing between them and the mother and child. "You have guests?" one of the neighbors asked, his tone suspicious. "Just someone who needed help," Samuel replied evenly. The neighbor frowned. "She's Apache." Samuel didn't answer immediately. He didn't look away. "She's a mother. And she's on my land, under my care. There's no problem." The men exchanged glances, sensing the firmness in Samuel's voice. They muttered something about being careful, and then rode away. But the message was clear. They were watching. Naira felt ashamed. "I caused trouble for you," she whispered as the riders disappeared. "You did nothing wrong," Samuel said. "People can think what they want. I make my own choices." Naira looked down, not knowing what to say. No one outside her own people had ever defended her so confidently. As evening approached, Aaliyah began to help Samuel with small chores, gathering eggs from the chicken coop, handing him small tools, holding the bucket during milking. She giggled shyly when the goat nudged her arm. Samuel felt a warm joy spreading through him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. When dinner time came, Samuel cooked a pot of stew with vegetables from his storage. He made sure it was enough for all three of them. They ate together in silence that felt more like comfort than awkwardness. After the meal, Naira cleaned the dishes without being asked. She dried them carefully, placing each one exactly where she found it. When she finished, she approached Samuel. "We will leave in the morning," she said quietly. "We have stayed too long." Samuel put down the piece of wood he was carving. "Why?" "It is not right," she answered. "Your neighbors are unhappy. They will talk. They will cause problems for you." Samuel leaned back slightly, studying her expression. She wasn't thinking of herself. She was thinking of protecting him. "You don't need to worry about me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I decide who can stay on my land." Quote. Naira looked conflicted. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her felt she didn't deserve such protection. She had lived too long, being pushed aside, told she didn't belong. "You have helped us more than anyone has in years," she whispered. "I don't want to be the reason you face trouble." Samuel shook his head. Helping someone in need isn't trouble. A long silence settled between them. The fire crackled softly, glowing warmly against the cabin walls. Aaliyah fell asleep again, curled up like a small kitten. Naira watched her daughter's peaceful face, and something inside her softened. Samuel stood and placed an extra log on the fire. "You both stay tonight," he said gently. "There is no danger here." Naira didn't argue. She simply nodded, though her heart felt heavy with worry. She wasn't used to safety. She wasn't used to a place where someone stood up for her. Everything inside her felt confused, grateful, scared, hopeful, uncertain. Later that night, when Samuel stepped outside to check the animals, he saw Naira standing near the door, watching him. She didn't speak, but her eyes held a quiet question. Why was he doing all this? Samuel didn't respond with words. Instead, he returned to the cabin, checked the warmth near their bed, and made sure they had enough blankets. His actions told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't helping her because he wanted anything in return. He wasn't doing it out of pity. He was simply a man who couldn't ignore a mother and child in need. As the night grew colder outside, the warmth inside the cabin seemed stronger than ever. For the first time in a long time, Naira slept without fear. And for the first time in years, Samuel didn't feel alone. Neither of them knew it yet. But this peaceful, fragile moment was only the beginning of something that would change all three of their lives in ways they never expected. The next morning arrived quietly, with the sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. Samuel woke early, as usual, but his mind was already troubled. He had slept, but not peacefully. He kept thinking about the way his neighbors had looked at Naira the previous day, the suspicion, the judgment, the subtle warning in their eyes. He knew people could be unfair, especially toward those they didn't understand. And he knew that if he didn't act soon, someone in town might try to force Naira and her daughter off his land. Samuel wasn't a man who liked conflict, but he wasn't afraid of it either. He had always lived by one rule: protect those who need protection. And now, he felt responsible for the two people sleeping by his fire. When he stepped outside, the sky was still waking up. Frost covered the ground. His horse snorted softly in the cold air. Samuel saddled it quietly, making sure not to disturb Naira or Aaliyah. He planned to return before they woke. If he was going to protect them, he needed to speak to the right person, the sheriff, an old friend who understood fairness. Samuel rode into town with determination. The wind stung his face, but his mind was focused. When he reached the sheriff's office, he tied his horse and stepped inside. Sheriff Collins looked up from his desk, surprised to see him so early. "Morning, Sam," the sheriff said. "You look like something's bothering you." Samuel didn't waste time. "I need to talk to you about something important." He explained everything: how Naira and her daughter had come to his ranch, how desperate they were, how hard she worked, how she harmed no one, and how neighbors were already whispering. He didn't hide his anger about it. "She's just trying to survive," Samuel said tightly. "And she has a child. I won't let anyone push them away." Sheriff Collins studied him carefully. Samuel wasn't someone who spoke out of anger. If he said something mattered, it truly mattered. "Sam," the sheriff said after a long pause, "you've always helped people. If you say they're good folks and mean no trouble, I'll stand by you. No one has the right to chase them off your land." Relief washed through Samuel, though he didn't show it. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But," the sheriff added gently, "you know how people can be. Some will accept it, some won't. If anyone causes trouble, come straight to me." Samuel nodded. He trusted the sheriff. And now, he knew Naira and her daughter would be safe as long as he stayed firm. When he rode back toward the ranch, the morning sun was much brighter. But the moment he saw his cabin, his steps slowed. Something was wrong. Naira was outside, standing with her bag in her hand. Aaliyah held onto her mother's dress, scared and confused. The sight made Samuel's heart drop. Naira had packed everything. She thought she had to leave. Samuel rushed toward them. "Where are you going?" he asked, breathless. Naira kept her eyes low. "You were gone. I thought it was best we leave before more trouble comes." Samuel shook his head firmly. "I went to town to make sure you won't have trouble." She looked up sharply, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What?" "I spoke to the sheriff," he said. "He promised no one will force you away. You and your daughter are safe here. I made sure of it." For the first time since he met her, Naira's face crumbled. Not from sadness, but from something deeper, something rare. She didn't understand kindness like this. Not from strangers. Not from men. Not from the world outside her tribe. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. "You barely know us." Samuel looked at her quietly, then glanced at Aaliyah, clinging to her mother's dress. "Because no one should face winter alone with a child. Because you're both good people. Because it's the right thing to do." Naira's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. She quickly wiped them away, refusing to break down in front of him. She was strong. But the world had treated her harshly for so long that simple kindness felt overwhelming. Before she could say anything more, 3 riders approached the ranch again. The same neighbors from before. Their faces carried the same suspicion. Naira immediately pulled her daughter behind her, panic rising. Samuel stepped in front of them instantly, his posture straight, his voice calm but unshakably firm. "What do you want?" he asked. One rider cleared his throat. "We just came to check if everything's all right. We saw your guests." Again. "They're not guests," Samuel replied. "They're under my protection. I've spoken to the sheriff. There will be no trouble." The riders exchanged looks. They hadn't expected Samuel to take such a strong stand. He wasn't usually a man who liked confrontation. But today, he was unmovable. One of the neighbors tried again. "Sam, it's unusual, that's all. People will talk. Let them," Samuel said calmly. "My land. My decision." The men realized they had lost this battle. After a few murmured words, they turned their horses and left, casting one last look over their shoulders. When they disappeared, Naira let out a breath she had been holding tightly. She didn't realize how much fear had gripped her until that moment. Samuel turned to her gently. "You see? Nothing will happen. You're safe here." But Naira wasn't relieved, she was overwhelmed. "You shouldn't fight for us," she said softly. "We don't deserve this trouble." Samuel frowned. "Who told you that? Surviving isn't trouble. Asking for help isn't trouble." Naira lowered her head. "People rarely think so." Samuel paused, choosing his words carefully. I think so." For a moment, silence settled between them. Aaliyah hugged her mother's leg, looking up with trust in her small eyes. Naira bent down and stroked her daughter's hair. She knew she needed a place where her child could sleep without fear, eat without shame, and grow without being chased away. When she looked up again, something in her expression had changed, not comfort yet, but a sense of possibility. Samuel picked up her small bag and handed it back to her. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "Not today. Not tomorrow. Not unless you want to." She stared at him, her breath trembling. She wasn't used to being given choices. She wasn't used to being respected. The warmth of Samuel's words made her chest tighten. Inside the house, Samuel prepared a simple lunch. Naira sat near the fire, still shaking slightly from the earlier confrontation. When he brought her a bowl of warm stew, she accepted it without arguing for once. She didn't try to refuse or insist on earning it immediately. She just said, "Thank you." Aaliyah sat beside her mother, dipping small pieces of bread into the stew with delight. Samuel watched them quietly. The sight brought a strange warmth into his heart. Later that afternoon, Samuel went outside to check on the cattle. To his surprise, instead of staying in the cabin, Naira followed him. She didn't bring chores with her. She didn't ask what she should do. She simply walked beside him, her daughter holding her other hand. "Samuel," she said softly, "I don't know how to repay you." He shook his head. "You don't need to." Naira stopped walking. Her eyes softened. "People don't do what you did today. People don't defend us." Samuel looked back at her with steady eyes. "Maybe they should." Naira swallowed hard, touched more deeply than she could say. She looked down at Aaliyah, who was now playing with a small stick, drawing shapes in the dirt. The child was smiling, truly smiling for the first time in days. In that moment, Naira made a quiet decision in her heart. They would stay. For now. And she would trust him. A little. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and red, the ranch felt different. Warmer. Fuller. Alive. Samuel walked beside the mother and child, feeling something he had not felt in years. Purpose. He had thought he was rescuing them. But without realizing it, they were changing him too. And neither of them knew how much more their lives would intertwine in the days ahead. The days that followed settled into a rhythm none of them had expected. Samuel woke early every morning, as he always had. But now when he stepped outside, he sometimes saw Naira already awake, tending to the fire or brushing dust from the porch. Aaliyah would be sitting nearby, wrapped in a blanket, watching birds with sleepy wonder. For a man who had lived in quiet solitude for so long, the presence of two gentle souls on his ranch filled the open space with something he had forgotten how to name warmth. Naira didn't stay inside the house often. She preferred helping around the ranch, even if Samuel tried to tell her she didn't need to work as hard. She washed clothes by the creek, fed the chickens, gathered eggs, organized tools, and swept the floors of both the cabin and the barn. Each task she did, carefully, almost respectfully, as if she wanted to thank the land for sheltering them. Samuel noticed how she would pause sometimes, looking out into the distance with a quiet expression. Not scared, not sad, just thoughtful. He never interrupted those moments. He understood how important they were. People who had gone through hardship carried memories like stones. They needed moments of silence to place those stones down, one by one. Slowly, the ranch began to feel different. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It felt peaceful, instead of lonely. Samuel found himself listening for the soft sound of Aaliyah's feet running across the wooden floor, or for the gentle hum of Naira's voice as she worked. Even the horses seemed calmer, as if sensing the new balance of life around them. One afternoon, Samuel was repairing a corral fence. The sun was warm, and a cool breeze moved across the grass. He didn't hear Naira approach until she was standing beside him, her shadow long on the ground. She held a pair of gloves in her hands, his spare ones, and offered them to him. "You forgot these," she said softly. Samuel smiled. "Thank you." She watched him for a moment before asking, "Do you need help?" "Always," he replied with a small grin. She studied his face, trying to determine if he was joking. But she joined him anyway, kneeling beside him to hold the wooden posts steady while he hammered in the new nails. They worked in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind filled with understanding and trust. When they finished, Naira brushed dust off her skirt and looked around the ranch. The sky stretched wide above them, the grass danced under the wind, and the distant hills glowed in the afternoon sun. "Your land is beautiful," she said quietly. "It feels peaceful." "It wasn't always," Samuel admitted. "It was just quiet before. Now it feels different." Naira didn't ask what he meant. She felt it too. Later, as the day began to fade, they walked back toward the cabin. Aaliyah was sitting on the porch, holding a small wooden carving Samuel had given her, a little horse he had crafted during one of his long winter nights. The girl's smile stretched wide when she saw them returning. Samuel felt something inside him soften again. He hadn't imagined this life for himself. He had never pictured children, laughter, or companionship. But now, he couldn't remember how his ranch had looked without these two faces in it. That evening, as they ate dinner together, Naira suddenly spoke, in a tone that sounded both nervous and determined. "Samuel," she said, her voice calm but uncertain. "Today, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time." Samuel looked up, listening carefully. "I felt safe," she confessed. "For many months, I have been running from place to place, trying to find somewhere my daughter could sleep, without fear. I didn't think such a place existed anymore. But I think we found it here." Her words struck Samuel deeply. He put his spoon down and looked directly into her eyes, wanting her to know he understood the weight of what she was saying. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "Both of you. For as long as you want." Naira lowered her eyes, and a gentle smile touched her lips. She didn't speak, but her silence was full of acceptance. Days turned to weeks, and the routine grew more natural. Samuel began teaching Aaliyah small ranch tasks: how to brush the horses, how to gently lift a chicken, how to help him water the garden. The little girl followed him everywhere, her laughter filling the once empty spaces of the ranch. Samuel found himself smiling more than he had in years. One morning, Naira surprised him by preparing breakfast before he woke. The smell of warm bread and herbs filled the cabin. When he stepped into the kitchen, she stood by the stove, looking slightly embarrassed. "You didn't have to do that," Samuel said. "I wanted to," she replied gently. "You have done so much for us. I want to share the work of this home." Samuel wasn't sure when the cabin had become this home in her eyes. But he felt an unexpected warmth spread in his chest. Another week passed. One afternoon, while they gathered firewood near the tree line, Naira suddenly spoke again. "Samuel," she said softly, "I want to stay." Samuel stopped, surprised by how openly she said it. "I want to stay," she repeated. "Not only because we need shelter. Not only because we have nowhere else to go. I want to stay because this place feels right. My daughter is safe here. She laughs here. She sleeps without fear. And I feel peaceful here too." Her voice trembled slightly, but her gaze was steady. Samuel set down the wood he was carrying. He didn't say anything immediately. Instead, he took a slow breath and studied her face. She wasn't asking for charity. She wasn't seeking protection out of desperation. She was choosing this place. Choosing safety. Choosing stability. Choosing a life. "You can stay," Samuel said finally, his voice steady and warm. "As long as you want. This land is big enough for all of us. And I would be glad if you stayed." Naira let out a slow breath, relief washing through her. She didn't smile big or cry or say many words. But the way her shoulders relaxed and the way her eyes softened spoke louder than anything she could have said. From that moment, something shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but naturally. They became a unit. A small family built out of kindness and survival, not out of duty. Naira continued to help with the ranch work. Samuel began fixing small things around the cabin that she needed. Aaliyah grew healthier, happier, stronger. One afternoon at the creek, Samuel saw Naira teaching her daughter how to wash clothes the traditional way. Aaliyah splashed water everywhere, laughing wildly, while Naira tried to keep her focused. Samuel leaned on a tree, watching them from a distance. He didn't interrupt. He simply observed the peace they brought to his land. He realized then that saving them hadn't been a favor. It had been a blessing for him. As spring arrived, the ranch became alive with new colors. Flowers bloomed near the creek. Birds built nests in the trees. And every morning, Samuel heard Aaliyah's gentle giggles drifting through the open window. One warm evening, as the sun set in vibrant orange and purple hues, Naira approached him while he sat on the porch. She held a small handmade necklace, woven from threads and tiny wooden beads. "This is for you," she said quietly, offering it with both hands. "In my tribe, we give this when someone has given us safety and honor." Samuel accepted the necklace gently, touched more deeply than he could express. "You didn't have to give me anything," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. Samuel looked at her, the golden light reflecting on her face. "You changed mine, too." In the soft evening light, with the quiet sound of the wind brushing the tall grass, it became clear to both of them. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't charity. This was a new beginning. A family formed not by blood, but by kindness, trust, safety, and shared hope. And the cowboy who once lived alone now had 2 reasons to come home every night. Reasons that made his once empty ranch feel full, warm, and alive. From a desperate plea for one night of work came a lifelong bond that none of them could have imagined.